You're listening to Outside the Box with Ben Cominos here on WHBY and Political Voices Network. Outside the Box is brought to you by Roush Plumbing and Remodeling, the plumbing and remodeling company the Fox Valley depends on. Well, we've got a lot to get into here today, friends. It's kind of ironic. I cut my promos for the weekend shortly I get off the air. And given the nature of this program, I don't know what's going to happen um, over the course of 72 hours. And so if you heard the promo playing that's been playing for the last 72 hours, I say this feels like a good week from politics. This feels like a time to turn your brain off, watch some some NFL drafts, some NHL and NBA playoffs, and not really concern yourself with the minutia in politics. And of course, it has a funny way of making sure that you don't get a time to disconnect from that ever. We're going to be jumping into that story just momentarily, but I refuse to allow the events of the weekend to throw off how I was intending to start this show. I had a very cool opportunity over the weekend, and a handful of you have reached out to me over the course of the last 48 hours or so, asking where you can see Allie's saying on the TikTok chat that I jinxed all of us. Yeah, maybe I did. People have been asking where they can see the speech that I made on Saturday. It will be up on my YouTube channel. I have a friend who's actually editing some video together. As soon as that's done, I'll have it up, and I will let you guys know how that works when it's available from there. But it is not available as of right now. But for those of you asking, it went very well. It was a very cool experience to do something like that because I kind of got to see the inner workings of a political party and see what goes on behind the scenes there. And it was very funny. I actually had a friend of mine explain this to me because, those of you listening to my voice right now, especially over the WHBY airwaves, you have gotten used to my attitudes. When I say, when Democrats inevitably get a majority in the House and Senate after the midterms in 2026, I don't want to see an entire 2-year period of Trump impeachments and holding ICE agents to account and all of these other different factors that don't impact us economically. And you could physically see people reacting like outwardly at that statement. I was in a Democratic event. They were like, who is this guy and how does he get an opportunity to speak here? And as I explained my logic and I worked people through why I don't want to see that and what we should be seeing coming out of a Democratic Party that has controls of some levers of government again, you almost watched minds change, which is very different than doing the show. I think Outside the Box does change minds. I think we approach these conversations in a very specific way, in a way that I think a lot of other talk radio doesn't have the nuance to do. And we will be exhibiting that nuance in just a few moments here. But you can't physically see the minds change. Whereas in this video, you kind of see people operating one way. And the best part is, and you guys have kind of wired me for this kind of stuff, I took live questions at the end. I said it was just like taking calls during the show. I don't know who's on the other side of it. All I know is that somebody wants to make a comment or ask a question or make a statement, and I'm here for it. And we took live responses for about 10 to 12 minutes after the speech wrapped up. One person called for me to run for office, but I mean, what else is new? Not yet, ladies and gentlemen. But but nevertheless, I had a very good time, and I do appreciate the 7th District Dems inviting me. And anytime the Conservative Party wants me there, I'd be happy to talk to you guys about your shortcomings as a party as well. You just got to be willing to listen to it is going to be the only problem. And whether or not you do or don't, that's on you. But very fun weekend, at least early in Saturday morning was super enjoyable for me. What's interesting is I woke up fairly early on Saturday, like obscenely early, and I get up at 4:30 in the morning. So for me to say obscenely early, that should give you an idea of how early I was up. Just because once my mind gets racing, it's kind of hard for me to go back to bed. I spent most of my day out in Wausau, out in seventh district, Wisconsin territory. Didn't get back till later in the afternoon, and I'm being told I'm already more qualified to run for president than the current guy. Maybe. I haven't hosted a reality show, so what do we know? But I got back into town shortly before the Penguins playoff game was starting. I didn't go out for it or anything. I had a very lame Saturday night. Um, I was watching the game and I was so tired from getting up so early that even though the score was 3-2 in a potential elimination game, I ended up passing out and not even catching the end of the game, which the Penguins did end up winning. Game 5's tonight, no fair weatherness, Pens in 7. Um I wake up on Sunday to a friend of mine, and all the message said was, "So that's obviously staged, right?" And so I'm sitting there, having not taken any politics in for 36 hours, um, having just watched, or well, I the first thing I did when I wake up is yell, "Hey Siri," and then it tells me of what the score was of the Pens game, and then I see that text message, and I was like, "No, I think they really pulled it together." And needless to say, he was talking about something else entirely. I had no less than a half a dozen text messages coming from across the political aisle questioning whether or not what took place on Saturday night was staged or not. No, I don't. At least given the evidence. And I have to say, before I go any further, the show's called Outside the Box, and I really enjoy having some perspectives that are outside of the mainstream, doing a show that I think you struggle to get in more traditional styles of media. And this current era of American politics is taking all of the fun out of doing a show like this because you can't even, moments after it happened, you're watching people share clips of a Fox News interview where the caller gets cut off and then immediately explanations about how everybody was losing cell phone service because the room they were in had bad reception. There was an AI video that could not have been more clearly labeled as AI, shared by Benny Johnson, right wing podcaster and guy who receives his money from Russia. And of course, because we are America and our internet literacy is not very high, people were running that video of the attempted assassination up the flagpole, saying, "Look how easy it was for this person to sprint past the entire security team." Meanwhile, you go and look in the video in the upper left-hand corner, clear as day, it says "Clear Cut AI" or like "Cap Cut AI," something to that effect. Very obviously labeled the way that you would think something like that should be labeled. Um, it's kind of ironic, given I just had Fox Valley literacy on for the local half hour, that now we're talking about internet literacy. As Ali highlights, we really are struggling with literacy of all types in America these days. And it's just a race to demonize the left, demonize anti-Christians, demonize violence, demonize political allies, whatever the situation may be, whatever's going to get you the most clicks, whatever's going to enact the most rage in that particular moment. That's what's going to get run up the flagpole. And I have to say, I'm getting sick and tired of it. And I'm tired of having to do this same segment every time something like this happens. When inevitably some of the worst actors on the face of the earth show up and start to pretend like it's a one-sided issue, or that the actions of one person are somehow indicative of a greater whole, or just memory holing all of the obvious examples to the counter of the point that people are trying to make. Every single time something like this happens, inevitably we find ourselves marching down this pathway. For instance, there's a teacher in Kakana, I don't have his name in front of me, essentially making a joke. It was MAGA, but with an extra A, saying that we have to make American assassins great again, saying that the aim wasn't good enough. And immediately there's a right-wing outcry for this person's job, because how can this person possibly be trusted with the responsibility that he has and be willing to say things? Meanwhile, 2 days after we started bombing Iran, a Wisconsin-based talk show host called for Iran to assassinate the sitting governor of Minnesota. Not only did the people who want this teacher's job not say anything, but that person not only still has his job, but was asked to write for a second publication after the fact, thus only amplifying his reach further than what was. I'm sick and tired of the constant double standard that people are held to in this society, trying to pretend that only one side is acting this way. You know, for the record, I'm 38 years old. There's an 18-year-old version of me out there in the ether that absolutely would relish the moment to be an edgelord in this situation, to make the jokes that oh, people just don't like the jokes that I'm making because my humor's too dark, because I'm too edgy. But no, in reality, I was just an 18-year-old that wasn't very funny, and I had to learn how to be able to make jokes. Gave a speech in front of a room of about 150 people, and I got them laughing pretty hard without being a jag. It's not that difficult. No matter what ends up happening in the world of politics, there will be people making jokes. Trump Jr. sending, "This is my Halloween costume," and it was a pair of whitey tighties and a hammer after Nancy Pelosi's husband was almost murdered. Kirk at Minocqua Brewing making a comment about free beer going out the day that the president finally dies. Donald Trump himself saying, "Good, I'm glad Robert Mueller's dead. Now he won't be able to hurt anybody going forward." The constant effort of cancel culture after the fact of a major moment, and then the complete turning away anytime someone on your team misbehaves, has to stop if we are ever going to expect to get out of this cycle. The fact of the matter is, there's a reason why the political violence is ramping up more. And it's the exact reason that I have been highlighting for you basically since you've met me. People feel pressed. They are nervous about what the future holds. This person, despite the president's effort to paint him as anti-Christian, was incredibly, he's not dead, is incredibly Christian. He actually, in his manifesto, for those of you that didn't take the time to read it, essentially used his Christianity as the reason for why he felt the way he did. At one point, he's talking about rebuttals to common myths, talking about how turn the other cheek is meant when violence is done to you, not when it's done to oppressed populations. I don't care if you agree or disagree with what he's saying. I'd argue you should never engage in the kind of actions that Cole Allen decided to engage in yesterday. But to go up in front of a microphone moments after it happened and say that this person was anti-Christian and hated Christians, well, that kind of gives the game away that he was intending to try and sow divide. He being the president, of course, after the fact, because there's no basis for reality in that claim. What took place on Saturday was a disgusting attempt to try and right perceived wrongs in the eyes of one person who has clearly lost his capacity to think rationally anymore. And this is yet just another example of how the weirdo loner narrative, the trench coat wearing weird guy, because let's be real, it is oftentimes men, occasionally women, but oftentimes men, the narrative surrounding what somebody who acts like this looks like, what they act like, what type of activities they engage in. This person was a teacher. This person, not that, I apologize for continuing to say was. This person is a teacher. This person makes video games. This person is a tutor. This person was a well-integrated person in society. If you read the manifesto, he went to painstaking lengths to make sure that there would be no civilian casualty, that he was directly aiming his vitriol at the political class. This is kind of rewriting our conversations about this in general. But what I will not abide is pretending that this kind of rhetoric has nothing to do with how we ended up in the situation that we are in.
President Donald Trump took to Truth Social, branding Arizona Senator Mark Kelly and 5 other congressional Democrats as traitors who deserve the death penalty.
Over the weekend, Trump effectively said that Milley should be executed for treason.
The president reacting to Mueller's death on Truth Social, saying, "I'm glad he's dead."
Knock the crap out of him, would you? I will pay for the legal fees.
If I say don't hurt him, then the press says, well, Trump isn't as tough as he used to be.
President Trump is responding to Rob Reiner's death, posting on Truth Social. Reiner's death was due to, quote, the anger he caused others through his massive, unyielding, and incurable affliction with a mind-crippling disease known as Trump derangement syndrome.
The former president posted this photo of himself getting ready to swing a baseball bat next to a photo of Bragg. Today, Bragg's office received a package containing white powder and a threatening note.
I love the old days. You know what they used to do to guys like that? They'd be carried out on a stretcher, folks. Like to punch him in the face, I'll tell you.
President Trump tweeting, when the looting starts, the shooting starts.
Try not to hurt him. If you do, I'll defend you in court.
We had some people, some rough guys like we have right in here, and they started punching back. It was a beautiful thing. I would have been boom, boom, boom. I'll beat that.
Riots if he gets charged with a misdemeanor. She says, you know, the quote, potential death and destruction in such a false charge could be catastrophic for our country.
I don't know if I'll do the fighting myself or if other people will. Like when you guys put somebody in the car and you're protecting their head, I said, you can take the hand away, okay?
I am not making an excuse for this person behaving the way they did. But what I am saying is I will not accept some narrative that pretends that this is one-sided. I will not pretend that some kind of effort has been made by this administration to tamp down the rhetoric. People are not seeing the economic relief that they need, and they are behaving in an outlandish way that is not acceptable and should be condemned. But the fact is, we watch this play out on both sides. And believe you me, MAGA, I recognize when during Trump 1, anytime anyone who voted for Trump ever came out and behaved a certain way, the mainstream media immediately took that opportunity to try and paint the entire MAGA movement with that lens. I am right there with you. I watched it happen. But the fact remains, you do not get to then send Stickley out there, a.k.a. Nick Shirley, to be like, what are we going to do about this rampant left-wing problem? Because here's where I see this going. 2 weeks ago, we did a conversation about a rotating villain, about bad policy that always finds a way to get its way through Congress. Positive legislation always gets stymied, and negative legislation gets stopped. 2 weeks ago, there was an effort to extend FISA, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. And as we all know, this is an act that allows the U.S. government to spy on Americans. This is now going to be championed to get right-wingers on board with signing on for FISA again, or some big-brained liberals who finally found that bipartisan streak to help get this across the finish line in the House who weren't willing to vote for it before. And we will all begin getting surveilled more, and we will willingly give away our freedoms in the name of security. I haven't even scratched the surface of talking about how we're already trying to find solutions to this problem while actively ignoring every school shooting that happens. We're already trying to find solutions to this problem when we see shootings happen at parades and movie theaters and all these different places. But the fact that it's impacting the political elite, well, now we need to figure out a way to do something about it because it seems like the wheels have come off. I am not willing to pretend that that is somehow a normal person's way of thinking because objectively it just isn't. And on top of all of this, Ashley St. Clair, I put a video up. If you don't follow me on any of my socials, there's a video up on any of them. Take your pick. She is a former right-wing podcaster and one of Elon Musk's many, many baby mamas. Those Africans, I'll tell you what, they just need to get married. You know, they're detriment to society. Am I doing this right? She took to TikTok to show a screenshot, which I shared on my socials, of no less than 24 different accounts, right-wing accounts, making this about the ballroom, saying, I don't want to hear another comment about the ballroom again. As much money as is necessary needs to go to the ballroom. So you're meaning to tell me, moments after an assassination attempt on the president, 24 plus different accounts with multi-million person followings, plus I'm sure dozens, if not hundreds, of other smaller accounts, all tweeting and sharing in unison about the importance of a ballroom in the aftermath of this moment. Is that truly what we are supposed to believe took place? Or is it not clear that there is a coordinated effort to make this conversation about literally anything else? And I think the weirdest part about all of this is how few people actually believe what they saw took place on Saturday was real. Maybe this is a downside to social media. Maybe we're just dumber than we used to be. But like 9/11 trutherism took a very long time to take root, to take hold in society. And I mean, it still persists today. So do questions about the moon landing. It's not a unique thing to this moment in time. But as I kind of started this conversation off, it takes a lot of the enjoyment out of doing a show called Outside the Box when everybody feels like they are in a constant race to have the most outlandish belief they possibly could in the aftermath of the event like what we saw on Saturday. So this is just example, fill in the blank, of wanton political violence resulting in a conversation that in no way examines the root causes of what took place, is being used as an effort to vilify and cancel anybody who makes a comment that is untoward about what took place. And fundamentally, all that's going to happen is we are going to live in a more hyper-surveilled version of this country than what we are already living in. And I said this was the weekend that you should disassociate from politics. I'll tell you what, if anybody has comments about this, I welcome them. 920-281-1150, 920-281-1150. If you're intending to come here and try and spread rumors or have misinformation or try and paint this as an only one-side issue, please know that I have dozens of examples already at the helm of both right and left wingers negatively impacting the discourse and engaging in actions that could be vilified. So don't even bother, because I absolutely am in a position to put you in your place right now, and I'd rather not do a show about that today. If you have comments about where we are at outside of that, 920-281-1150. Otherwise, I've said about all I can say about yet another example of this. I am not going to use this story to generate clicks or to try and find an outlandish opinion that will separate me from the other people that do what I do. I'm sick and tired of living in a country where this is the norm. It's the norm for all of us every single day. I'll be honest, and this should show you how naive I am. I went and spoke at a political event the morning of this event, of this assassination attempt. And it didn't cross my mind that something bad was going to happen to me while I was there. And I think having what took place on Saturday night take place the same day that I was out speaking at my own event is going to resonate with me in a way that I don't know that I'll ever be able to forget or shake. And I don't want to be involved in some kind of new statistic where someone ends up getting hurt or worse, and the only thing that comes about it from the other side or from your own side is, and that's why all these MAGAs mean so much trouble. That's why all these blue MAGAs mean so much trouble. It's a sad day. And I can't stand Trump. Trash president. This presidency might be worse than Reagan. We'll see. He's got 2 more years. I'm not holding out hope that he's going to turn it around. Me saying that he's a trash president, me saying that his policies are failures, is not me celebrating what took place. It's establishing a reality that so many Americans share. And the fact that we are now going to try to use this event to police language about policies going forward, I will not be abiding by. So if you have an issue with that, I'm happy to take your texts or calls, but I'm not going to pretend that that's the case. I'm going to go to break now. When we come back, unless any of you have something else to say, we're going to switch gears. Plenty more to jump into here. That'll be on the other side. You're listening to Outside the Box with Ben Cominos here on WHBY. All right, we're back outside the box. Ben Cominos, WHBY. I'm so happy about this YouTube chat because Clint out in West Virginia found it, and like I'll mute him for 24 hours every now and again when he gets too obnoxious. But I just did a 25-minute segment about surveillance and political violence and all these different factors. And my YouTube chat is all about whether or not millennials are lazy or not, because the dude's got 3 talking points. And I'm just happy that other people get to experience exactly what I was dealing with in my private chat. 15 text messages a day, every single day. So that's kind of nice here. Allie, by the way, in the TikTok chat is studying forensics right now and said that it's been kind of that's what their entire class has been examining, is this kind of surveillance that's coming our way under the Trump administration. And longtime listeners know I believe the Republican Party exists in order to get Republicans in favor of more stringent security and surveillance, and the Democratic Party exists to get Democratic voters to agree to the shady foreign agenda activities that Democrats engage in. As I've stated 1,000 times over, if Kamala Harris is president, we're still bombing Iran, but it'll be in the name of humanitarian issues. That's the only thing that would change. And liberals would be calling my show, telling me that I just don't understand what a thorn in the side of America Iran has been, and it would be MAGAs telling me that it's important for America to spend money on American stuff. Meanwhile, we know that when they say that, all they mean is let's cut social programs, but also no, let's just cut the social programs. We got our first call of the day. Anybody else wants to chime in? 920-281-1150, 920-281-1150. Hello, you're on Outside the Box.
Good morning, Ben. It's Betsy from Wisconsin.
Hello,
Hope
Betsy.
You're doing well.
Yeah, back at you. I'm, hanging on by a thread. What's on your mind?
I'm not in general a conspiracy theorist on either side, and so I don't buy the whole this was staged thing. And this is one of the reasons that I'm very sure it's not staged, is that President Trump agreed to be interviewed by Norah O'Donnell last night on 60 Minutes. I don't know if you had a chance to see that yet.
I saw the clip that's gone viral about them reading part of the manifesto to him, but that's about all I've seen of it.
Right, and so, part of the manifesto was that, this guy was aiming at a pedophile and et cetera, and Trump called Norah O'Donnell a disgrace for even reading that.
Right.
God forbid she would read something that was part of the investigation on the news, something that was fact, right? Here's what the alleged shooter said. And, Trump, and I suspect that if it was a planned event, that wouldn't have been part of the manifesto.
I like where your head's at. I like that was a logical and deductive way to, I think, if anyone were listening and were on the fence, I that's the way that I prep this show. So I like where your head's at on that, and I think that makes a ton of sense. But go on. I apologize for interrupting.
Oh, no worries. I was also going to mention another very sadly ironic course of events that happened, similar to you speaking to the room full of Democrats the same day that this event was happening. Many years ago, and I don't remember the exact date, a bunch of us from the Fox Valley teamed up as mentoring programs with the Volunteer Center, and we spent over a year getting General Colin Powell to come here and speak for our mentoring summit, and we landed him, and it was awesome, and we filled the Timber Rattler Stadium, and he spoke eloquently and wonderfully about the value of mentoring and how important it is for our youth, and that was literally the same day that the Columbine shooting happened.
Oh, wow. It kind of hits home a little more. Yeah, without a doubt.
Oh, it hit home big time.
Yeah.
Big time. Literally, it was probably happening while this was before this is before the internet became, to where you would have known what was going on, but I suspect it was happening literally the same time Colin Powell was taking the stage here in Appleton, Wisconsin.
Wow, that's absolutely wild. Well, hey, Betsy, I appreciate the viewpoint here and your logic there at a time when logic seems like it is rare commodity these days. So thanks for chiming in, and we'll talk again soon. All right.
Yeah, have a good one.
Yeah, take it easy. I think that's a fair assessment of things there. And what's crazy is she says this was before the internet, before we had a grasp of what's going on. Mark my words, I can't prove this, but I think it's by design. I think what our inability to separate truth from fiction online is by design. And we have watched it happen just over the course of Outside the Box. As I've kind of been insinuating the last couple of shows, I used to be able to use Twitter to find stories about union successes around the nation. I used to be able to find it. I knew about East Palestine, Ohio, not because it was getting wall-to-wall coverage on TV, but because of what was going on social media. Elon Musk buys it. Now my feed is filled with videos about how awesome it is to be a parent because Elon Musk is very nervous that there's not enough white people having kids. Please do not call him a Nazi or a racist. MAGA will try to get you fired. But we'll get into that another time. I don't know, like even in this era where news spreads so quickly, social media is good to find out who your team drafted if you are out and about speaking at an event during the NFL draft. I don't know that it's the best place to get real news about what's going on because you'll mostly get botted accounts and paid for shills all echoing the same script. So Justin says, after his first attempt at his life, how is there not an incredible improvement in security? I'm more convinced Secret Service is either inept or willfully complicit in being less than overwhelmingly dependable. Well, I have two theories about this, Justin. First of all, I think there's too many white people in the in the Secret Service. If only they hadn't fired all the blacks for being incompetent, maybe they might be a little better at their job. But thankfully, we've got a mighty white Secret Service making sure that the president's safe. They might leave something to be desired, but at least we know they've earned the job. But more importantly, like I say this all the time, and like God forbid, I don't want anything like this to happen, but like, do you really believe, like, when's the last time you've flown? And this has nothing to do with the shutdowns and DHS funding and all that. I would be asking you this question the same way in May of 23. You know what I mean? This is just an overarching principle. When you go to the airport, do you feel like everybody at TSA is hyper vigilant and hyper on point 24/7 and are going to nab anything in the bud that may end up taking off? Is that something that you think they are doing? Like, to me, and to Justin's point, just given the proximity into the last time there was an attempt, there probably should be a more heightened attitude there. But to bring it in the world of fiction, I always talk about it with the Night's Watch or the King's Watch in Game of Thrones. They had been watching for White Walkers for 1,000 years. It stands to reason that around year 560 of no attacks from White Walkers, you might take your finger off the pulse, right? You might all of a sudden lose your grip on what's going on, and then that's when these kind of things happen. I think the whole idea of security and safety is an illusion that we've all bought into. And while we can hyper support and defend certain individuals, the idea that we could ever completely shooter-proof a school or a church or a speaking engagement, whatever the situation is, I think that whole idea is having cold water poured all over it. And I do think it's important for me to reiterate, in case anyone's just joining us, the video that's out there of the guy sprinting past all the security agents, That is AI. It is very obviously labeled AI, and I shouldn't have to tell you this, but unfortunately, enough Americans fell for it that I have to tell you this. It's unreal. Hal says, I checked out the guest list at the correspondent dinner event. If the shooter had succeeded, we might very well be waking up this morning to 92-year-old Chuck Grassley as president. He was the only one in the top tier line of succession who wasn't at dinner. And you're exactly right. This was a State of the Union style caliber, I should say, event in terms of the list of secession. The vice president was there, the speaker was there, down the list, right? I didn't realize it got all the way to Grassley, but those points still exist. All right, with that, and I appreciate the comments, I appreciate Betsy's call here, and so much more. And we'll have a short segment on the other side of the break to put a bow on this conversation, and then we'll kind of switch gears here in the 10 o'clock hour. Still plenty of actual news to jump into here that isn't me having to play garbage man for a lot of the people that do my job that just have no morals or decency in how they do it. Far be it for me, though, to join them in the muck, I suppose. We'll be back in just a little bit. You're listening to Outside the Box with Ben Cominos here on WHBY. You know what's better than Googling a plumber and hoping for the best? Checking the reviews and seeing that your neighbors already trust and love them. Roush Plumbing has the Google reviews to back it up. Fox Valley homeowners are raving about the fast, friendly, reliable service. And here's something you don't see every day: a free text line to a real plumber. Got a question before you schedule? Text it. Sometimes that's all you'll need. And with spring rains coming, you don't want to wait to make sure that your sump pump is ready. So call or text Roush Plumbing, the plumbing and remodeling company the Fox Valley depends on. You can find that free text line and more info at timroushplumbing.com. Shout out to Metal Rosie on YouTube saying Ben Comino's outside the box expert is greater than Mel Kiper Jr. draft expert. I've definitely predicted the future better than him. But like in all seriousness, like I do find Mel Kiper Jr. to be obnoxious, but like to create an entire industry out of nothing, like he should be every free market capitalist's dream, because like draft coverage really didn't exist before Mel Kiper Jr. He kind of built that entire industry, labeled himself a draft expert, and despite being wrong all the time, we all just kind of bought into it. So I mean, I take that as a compliment that you view me as more of an expert than him, although I have to believe I'm accurate more frequently than he is, at a higher percentage at the very least. Look, this isn't going to be the last example of political violence in the era in the Trump presidency, let alone in America. Security obviously needs to be bolstered, and it doesn't need to be bolstered by hyper surveilling the American population. And this constant game, it's going to be a matter of which side isn't going to try and score points first. And I really don't know which one of the two is going to be the bigger person and try and do so. I try and use this platform to foster positive beliefs surrounding that idea. When a peer of mine, a colleague of mine, decided to take to social media to call for the assassination of a governor, I did not at any point be like, why is this person still on the air? I made no effort to try and take that person's livelihood. I dunked on him. I absolutely used it to highlight, man, how easy would it be to do my job if I just acted like a jerk like this? This guy's on easy street the way he's talking. But at no point do I ever call for people's jobs. I highlight when something is said that is untoward, and then I move on. I highlight that violence is pervasive, and that in a country where 60% of people don't know if they're going to be able to make their bills the next week, you're going to ultimately end up in a society where political violence becomes more prevalent. I'm not excusing it, but I also understand where it stems from, and I think we need to talk about things that way. With that, in the 10 o'clock hour, no more shooting conversation unless you guys want it. We've got reports about corporate profits shrugging off the tumult overseas. It's almost like that's part of the equation or something. Finland setting an example, much like Denmark, about how to address systemic inequality issues in America. AI girlfriends making people hireable, and one school district in Arkansas addressing a deficit in school spending. All of that and more after the news. Stay tuned. All right, we've returned outside the box. Ben Cominos, WHBY Political Voices Network. Outside the Box is brought to you by Roush Plumbing and Remodeling, the plumbing and remodeling company the Fox Valley depends on. If you're just joining us, we spent the better part of the first hour talking about the fallout from what took place at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. I was going back and forth a little bit with my YouTube and TikTok chats there. And by the way, please do consider subscribing to my YouTube page. It's just at Ben Cominos. Helps me out as we're trying to get this off the ground here. I will be my friends that were helping to edit the video of my speech from Saturday just emailed me. They sent me the video link via iCloud, and I don't know if I can upload it from there or not because I'm a bit of a boomer when it comes to technology. That's why I always have to say per capita, because I am not as advanced as a lot of people my age, and I'm sure there's plenty of people in their 60s that know their way around some of this stuff here. But I imagine I'm going to talk to the people here if they want my speech up on the HBY website. It'll be there as well. I don't have confirmation on that, of course. So all of that being said, if it's not there, then the only way to see it is going to be on my YouTube page. And man, oh man, would it be helpful if you guys could subscribe to that. Just search my name, Ben Cominos. The channel will be the first thing that pops up there. All right. With that, there's a number of other things going on in the world that I was intending to talk about until the way things transpired on Saturday. The show was supposed to be very different. Unfortunately, this is just like I said a couple weeks ago. There's good luck, there's bad luck, and there's Ben luck. And when one day is trending too well in the positive direction, it's almost like my spider senses go off, and I'm like, what's the thing that's going to happen right now that's going to completely knock us into a funk here? And sure enough, we got it. And it still is very surreal to me to kind of like not know that any of that was taking place. It goes to show you what life was like in the era pre-social media, because if you didn't have the news on, you just didn't know that this stuff was happening. And that was kind of the world that I got to live in for 12 hours. So naive to think that they were talking about the Pens game being rigged. And now here we are. All right. And with that, though, let's get into some actual stories here. And I want to start in Arkansas. I know that's where you guys thought I was going, right? I'd like to start in Arkansas because there's a pretty interesting story that I think we could learn about here. If we have a conversation for another year about school funding, I think I might actually lose it, because since I have been out here, that has kind of dominated specifically the conversation about our surplus and the ways to allocate the budget and what's going on with our property taxes and yada, yada, yada. This is what this show's all about, and I would like to highlight this for you guys because it goes to show you, if you stop whining and moaning and just start doing things, not only does the situation solve itself, but it actually gets a whole hell of a lot better if you have people involved that want to do these kind of things. Allow me to explain to you what took place if you haven't been informed already. There was a school district in Arkansas that was operating at a $250,000 budget deficit every single year. They were making cuts to different programs. Teachers weren't making nearly enough. Good buddy of mine actually married a teacher that was doing her job in Arkansas. They met elsewhere, but used to teach in Arkansas. Actually used to do Teachers Without Borders, whatever the hell the program was. Was actually in Gaza teaching kids at one point. Very fascinating experience that this individual had, to say the very least. She and I met at a wedding I was at in Colorado in October, and she was talking to me saying that she actually drove to one of her students' homes, and the student's home was a roof with 4 tarps as walls because they were too poor to afford a house or an apartment that had walls in rural Arkansas. Like, I think a lot of these kind of conversations get lost in the conversation about affordability, schooling, how much of a leg up so many different individuals have. And I think this is a very real conversation. We think things are trending negatively here. This is not a knock. I'm not saying that this is exclusively because of conservative policies, but I am willing to highlight that they most certainly are not changing things based on conservative policies. Here's where this story gets fun, though, and it gets interesting. And I'm not saying that the house that my friend was teaching at is in the same district as this one here. I do not know Arkansas's geography enough to know if that's the case or not. But here's what I do know. Over the course of a 3-year period, this school began building solar panels on farmland. They couldn't build it on the building itself for structural reasons that I'm not going to claim to know enough to understand why it wasn't doable. But what I do know is this school district over 3 years built 1,400 solar panels in farmland, generating energy for the people in that area. The school district, since making that decision, now, instead of operating at a $250,000 deficit, is operating at a $1.8 million surplus. Because of that decision, all of the teachers that were woefully underpaid are now receiving a $15,000 bonus. Every single one of them. Not a bonus. This is a salary increase. An extra $15,000 a year as a result of the Green New scam and the efforts to put these kind of platforms up around their school to generate energy. They're not only generating energy, but they're generating a surplus of energy. Now, I think it's important to highlight that we currently have one candidate running for governor here in Wisconsin that says he will do everything in his power to prevent anything like that happening and preserve our farmland. Now, here's where my problems stem from, because I do not believe that all of my suggestions that I make on this show are foolproof. I tell you guys what I would like to see happen. Things could absolutely fall apart. We don't know what will work and what won't. What we do know is what we're doing has us trending in a negative direction. And I think that's worth highlighting. If you don't want to do the solar panel thing, fine. Then let's examine the conversation about legalizing marijuana and generating the revenue that way. Oh, well, I don't like the smell of it, and as a conservative, I'm anti-legalizing marijuana. Turns out we're big government now. Okay, fine. Then what's your solution? Because underfunding these schools and pushing the people that can afford private school into private school and then cutting those people's taxes isn't going to be the solution that we need right now. So you do not have to agree with the things that I say, but what I can say is I present to you guys deliverable outcomes. An extra $15,000 for every teacher and no raise in property taxes. All of the programs being funded adequately and actually happening with a surplus is a good thing that we can actually talk about here. But we don't want to have these conversations in Wisconsin. We would rather narrow it down to trickle down or shut up and we'll talk to you in 2 years. And that's the way that things have been operating. If a school in Arkansas is willing to do this, Deep Red Arkansas, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, Arkansas, is willing to do this, then it stands to reason that we here in Wisconsin should probably be having a conversation about it. And if we're being real, we should be having a conversation about this nationwide. Because the same issues get brought up, the same shortcomings continue to get exemplified, but it doesn't change that we got to try something. Allowing it to gradually dwindle is only going to leave us further and further in a lurch. Look this story up. Arkansas School District, 1,400 solar panels. Type in 1,400 solar panels, Arkansas. I'm willing to bet the first 12 news stories you come across are going to be one of the ones that I was operating off of for this. This is what it's all about, guys. This is what politics could be. And instead, they'd have us fight about whether or not we need a ballroom or not. We're talking about sending a 44% increase to the Defense Department while we are allowing our school systems to degrade. By building these solar panels, not only are they generating an energy surplus, not only are they doing what they can in order to save money any way they can find, to the tune of almost a $2 million shift in spending habits as a result of this decision. And as I oftentimes like to ask you guys to drive a point home when we do stories like this, where else have you heard this story other than outside the box? I'm sure they are familiar with it in Arkansas. Why aren't we talking about it in Wisconsin while we have the umpteenth billionth conversation about school funding, about whether or not we should be siphoning our money into the pockets of people that can already afford private school or not, or whether or not we should up the funding yet again for schools? Why are we not examining this solar panel idea as an outcome, especially given the fact that there's empirical data to back up why it would make sense to do it? From $250,000 deficit to a $1.8 million surplus. All the teachers get more. All the arts and arts programs are funded. All the sports programs are funded. All of the programs are funded. The teachers are closer to a livable wage. The students are enjoying amenities at that school. And we're not even having a conversation about it here in Wisconsin. 920-281-1150, 920-281-1150. I'm interested in your thoughts about this as well. Shout out to the person on my TikTok chat that says, I got to hear you speak on Saturday. It was invigorating, and this is coming from a candidate. Thank you very much. The video will be up on YouTube shortly thereafter. See, the YouTube chat's trying to knock me down a peg. I can't be. My head is far too large at this point. I can't be talked down from here. But this isn't even the only example that I have for you guys about something empirically working, something that would actually change hearts and minds in America and in Wisconsin and actually be the beneficial programs that we would like to see in society. That is also happening across the pond, as it were. I have always leaned on the Denmark example. In Denmark, they had a homeless problem. They built homes for their homeless, solved 88% of their problem. Now they just got to deal with that 12% that's being a little bit finicky in how you're going to address it. Much more tolerable problem than what's out there. We don't want to copy that. What if I told you that there's another example of it now? And it keeps playing out in the exact same way as we continue pretending that we don't have the capacity to do it. Only one way to find out if I'm making that up or not. That's to stay right where you are. And we'll be back in just a little bit. You're listening to Outside the Box with Ben Cominos here on WHBY. All right, we're back outside the box. Ben Cominos, WHBY. Scott just hit me up on the text line here, reading it for my first time. Independent wealth cannot be built on solving problems, only with introducing nonsensical solutions and then not acting on them can somebody sustain a political career which somehow increases your wealth tenfold than what it pays. Well, isn't that the truth? There's no money in solving problems, and I think that's very real. It's funny, before I even was working in media, forget about having a show. um Before I was even working in it, I was talking with a guy who would invest in hedge funds. And I had my attitude towards the economy, but I really didn't know a whole lot. And he was trying to explain to me how hedge funds work. And like I'm gonna butcher this. I didn't plan to get into it. But by and large, these people take this money for these investments and they say the one thing they can't ever do is actually have a product. As long as it's speculative, as long as they are in the investment gathering phase, they're cool with like that's the way that it works. And you kind of have to cash out before like it actually gets to the point of the product being developed. The money is all in the process of getting to the point where the product is developed, and then the actual viability of that product is kind of irrelevant. Probably an important thing to keep in mind as we're watching infinity dollars get funneled into AI as time goes on. um I saw a post about it. I doubt I'm going to be able to find it here just live on the fly. But like Larry Ellison, yeah, here we go. Actually, I could. Open AI's failure, as per one person who works with Business Insider, who writes for Business Insider, would have you believe. OpenAI's failure wouldn't just be fatal for Oracle, but also Oracle founder Larry Ellison, who has pledged $346 million of his Oracle shares, which accounts for $61.5 billion, for an estimated $21 billion plus in personal loans that will face a big margins call if the stock prices ever drop. So, like, that's kind of a microcosm of the government issue or of the private business issue. This is why I oftentimes champion a joint solution to these problems, because private entity is here to consume everything, and government is here for never-ending funding without addressing the problems. Very famously, 7 electric car chargers being built with a multi-billion-dollar investment, as I just got done championing green principles. Because if you have a group that just build the freaking solar panels and do the things, society works. The problem with that is once everybody is using the sun to power things, well, how would energy companies be able to tell us that we have to pay that we have to pay more every time there's a war or a pandemic? Oh, well, the oil and gas shortage took place and we're not going to be able to get you guys any sun for a while. You notice how that doesn't have the same ring to it as when we are dependent on naturally occurring energy sources. This is why it's not allowed to catch fire. This is why it's not implemented nationwide, because there was an effort to do this federally. And we decided that's a scam and we're not going to do it. And then, moreover, the Democrats who were doing it weren't moving with enough fervor. They were not moving quickly enough to address the issues. So anybody who may have been on the fence was able to point to, see, they never follow through, much like liberals in California with the monorail, or much like liberals in California last week with Medicare for All, where they voted again to kill it despite having a supermajority in the Assembly and Senate and a Democratic governor. The list goes on and on here. Larry says Microsoft is talking about charging OpenAI per use, estimated cost $9 per day. I'll be real with you, I never use it. But if I were to use it, that would probably be enough for me to stop a $9 a day surcharge. That's how you end those kind of thing. I'll be real with you. I went to Vancouver to to run a half marathon without training back in 2013. OG listeners remember that story. I got blacked out drunk drinking Rumplemans, and my buddy who runs half marathons for a living was like, why don't we go to Vancouver and run a half marathon? And I was like, I could easily pull this off. Didn't train or anything, just signed up and eventually made my way down there. At that point, I still smoked cigarettes and chewed tobacco and a pack of Pall Malls, which for the smokers in the audience, those are trash. And far be it for me to speculate how expensive they are in 2026. But when I was smoking, they were like $4 for a pack, because who the F was buying Pall Malls? And then I went to Vancouver and it was $22 for a pack, $18 for one can of Grizzly Mint. And my buddy who I went with, who was conservative minded, very, very pro free markets, was like, see, Ben, here's that liberal government that you want so much with all of their excess taxes on everything. Do you like it? Do you like how liberals do this? I said, well, man, I'll be honest with you. This would probably get me to stop chewing. And this is probably going to kill me. So there's an element to the financial element. Maybe companies charging for AI is exactly what we're going to need to kill it. Because much like Google, the reason everybody uses Google, the reason the company has become a verb is because we're the product, right? You don't have to pay to use Google. You just hop on there and you use it. And then you find out all the information you need, or at least you used to. Google kind of sucks now. And then you move on from there. If I had to pay per Google or pay a monthly subscription for Google, I probably just wouldn't have it. You know what I mean? So maybe this will be a net positive. I'm not holding my breath just yet, but we'll see what ends up happening here. I received 2 calls almost back to back. There's not really a convenient way for me to tell you who's on hold right now, so we're just going to pot someone up, and hopefully you can hear my voice. I don't know what I said to elicit the call, but hello, you're on Outside the Box. Hello.
Must be me.
Yeah, what's up?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
You were talking about school funding and stuff like that. So my house just got reassessed. I live in the town of Grand Chute. And I'm just looking here. My county taxes went up 26.9%. Meanwhile, hang on, I got these pictures here. My brother, who lives in the same county, his went up 1.9%. And his school taxes, were in the same school district, went up 6.8%. Meanwhile, mine, I gotta go backwards again. Mine went up 19.5%. I'm kind of curious, how does that work?
Yeah, I'd have to see it in front of me myself here. You threw a lot of numbers at me, so I'd have to see exactly what was contributing to a lot of these factors that resulted in different numbers, because it obviously, assuming all things standard, shouldn't work that way. But I'm willing to bet, barring some kind of clerical error, that there's probably other information that I would probably need in order to make a full assessment of what's going on here. I mean, fundamentally, none of these taxes would be going up if we just allocated the surplus in the appropriate ways here. But I mean, yeah. So, I mean, that's the best I can do. Got me kind of shooting from the hip here with a lot of information here on the radio.
Yeah. So I'm just like, my taxes went up like 25%, and his only went up 2% on the county and 7% on the school tax. And it's like, how does that work?
Yeah, I'd have to believe there's other parts of information that we don't have here, but I'm not going to speculate. But email me the info, and I'll definitely look it over, and I can go from there. But I appreciate the call, nevertheless. Whether or not I can't speak to what that individual's experience was. It seems a little planned, but nevertheless, some interesting insight there. Nevertheless, hello, you're on Outside the Box.
Yeah, good morning, Ben. It's Gary calling. Say, regarding that previous caller, I'm sure the test scores and the overall performance went up 18 to 25% too. Isn't that the way it goes? But I was calling on your hedge fund thing. It kind of reminds me. It kind of reminds me of the oil companies when they talk about proven reserves and unproven reserves and how they carry those things on the books. It's the hedge funds they're selling you and they know how to get out of it. It's kind of like insider trading in Washington. You know, it's all fun when you're going up in the ride, but coming down can be a little scary. And I was thinking of mortgages. Remember the old, what was it, 2008 or whatever? You know, people were buying and selling these mortgages, thinking, and they were carried on the books, and they were thinking, well, we're going to get paid. Well, you know, when you're the last one out there, and you get stung by those, you know, without the government bailing you out, it's all free fall. And those people, the way the system works is people always bet on the upside. It's kind of like sturgeon fishing. Everybody thinks that they're going to go out there and get one because they hear the stories about how many fish are in the lake. And they say, well, my chances are pretty good. Well, they don't all come back with a sturgeon, you know, very few. So it's the odds. It's like going to the casino. And the same thing.
Gary, you're hitting on something that is one of my core beliefs, and you're exactly right. Any type of thing, whether you're talking about investments, whether you're talking about different cryptocurrencies, inevitably, some of those ended up hitting. People that invested in Bitcoin from the early 2010s ended up making a killing, and they sit there and say, see, it's because of my research and big brain that I was able to get here. Meanwhile, there were so many factors that contributed to that, any one of which could have turned on the drop of a hat at any point and not panned out the way they were anticipating. And you can associate that to different companies, different inventions, different fill in the blank, different, you said casino. Oh, no. I got it. The Brewers are playing the Buccos. The Buccos stink. I'm sure they'll be fine. Whoops, Brewers lost 2 out of 3 because it's a game of chance and anything can happen. The list goes on here, and I think your assessment of matters is exactly right, and I appreciate the call. It really is a big guessing game, and then banking on what's referred to as the survivor bias. Read my YouTube chat right now, and you can see one individual with survivor bias. I myself am a man removed from $60,000 in school loans that owns a home, that hosts a show that says you're never going to be able to pay off your school loans or own a home, while I'm currently doing the things, because society is designed in a way that I am supposed to look at my life and determine that I am in the position I'm in because I'm so much smarter, because I work so much harder, because I'm just better at what I do, and therefore I have been compensated appropriately. But for some reason, my mind is wired in a way that I refuse to allow myself to not realize exactly how lucky I am to be in the position that I am in, to be able to talk to you guys about this, to be able to say I'm on the other side of this, and it's not because I'm the man. It's not because I didn't make any mistakes. It's because I'm a lucky SOB, and knowing that most people do not have access to that kind of luck, I think, is the most frustrating part. To that effect, there's a very famous social media message out there where it says giving poor people some money makes crime go down better than giving cops more money. Says science. We did the science. We keep doing the science. Nobody in a suit ever cares, though. And that kind of ties into Scott's comment at the beginning of the segment as well. The people in suits, the politicians, the business owners don't want to solve the problems, because then once they solve the problems, there's no room for anybody to get rich. I oftentimes use my example of Denmark as this country that gave homeless people homes in order to pull 88% of their homeless population out of poverty. Well, Finland has joined the ranks. They gave every homeless person a house. And in Denmark, it took 18 months in order for us to get to 88% of those people gainfully employed and financially independent. In Finland, it was actually faster. 6 months. 6 months. And 85%, 17 out of 20 homeless people across the board found themselves with a job, financially independent. less crime, less hospital visits, less suffering, and including the cost of the house, it still costs less than the method of handling the homeless population per capita, the way that we do here in America and the way that they do in the UK as well, which I learned about while reading this report here. Every time it plays out that way, the outcomes are always the same. And inevitably, somebody chimes in and says, well, Ben, Finland's population is much smaller than ours. So, of course, they're able to give every homeless person a house because it wouldn't cost as much money. Great point. I never considered that. The GDP per capita here in America is $30,000 more, again, per capita. So, for every head, assuming that we had the exact same population as Finland, we would be making $30,000 more per person in GDP. Then on top of that, you have the fact that we are a massive country compared to what Finland is. And so the money that we have pouring into our coffers absolutely dwarfs anything going on in Finland. The difference is Finland isn't considering a 44% increase in their defense spending, despite the fact that their defense department has failed 8 audits in a row. We have Representative Tom Tiffany right now running for governor of Wisconsin, trying to say that he wants to be the tough-nosed auditor-in-chief of Wisconsin and making sure that if you fail in audits, that you not only don't receive any extra funds, but that the waste, fraud, and abuse is handled. Meanwhile, he is absolutely going to vote yes on a platform that is going to increase the budget of a defense department that couldn't pass an audit if its life depended on it. There is a frustration out there. Gary, I think a different Gary, saying, what's the drug problem like over there? If they're anything like most of their European counterparts, it's probably mostly legalized and people aren't nervous about getting the help that they need. I don't know enough about their specific instance there, but the fact is, when you vilify anybody that's on drugs the way us and most other countries have not, at least industrialized countries, then those issues kind of snowball, right? It's always important to remember America. They tell you the story in elementary school, and they're like, America was discovered because people were seeking religious freedom. The Pilgrims, the Quakers, the Puritans, they all traveled out to America because they were tired of being vilified for their religious beliefs. What's always left out of that story is that they came to America because the rest of the world was waking up to the fact that they were living in too much of a puritanical way. It's where the word comes from. Too much of a puritanical way. And while most of the people in Europe were like, yeah, I think we're going to lighten up on sex outside of marriage and things like that. And then these guys are like, what? We're going across the ocean and figuring out a place where we can clamp down on everybody's free life all the time. And that's kind of how America was founded. So when you talk about the drug problem, I'd argue that while that does go hand in hand with the homeless problem, part of the reason that that also continues to persist in the way that it does relative to other nations is we decide to take this Quaker approach to drug use instead of actually pretending that it's 2026. As Bell said, there must be more than this provincial life. But so kudos to Finland, joining Denmark, joining the handful of other countries, doing the obvious thing to address the problems. But I mean, if we did that, then what would MAGA have to run on in 2026? We have to fearmonger about the homeless population and crime and drug use. God forbid we do something about it. Let's just arrest them all and then have them do labor for free. That sounds not reminiscent of anything in American history before, right? Right? 920-281-1150, 920-281-1150. We're going to have one more segment on the other side of the break. And I want to get into this. AI girlfriends, because I see my male counterparts that are younger than me going down a dangerous path. And I feel like there's a lot of dudes in media that do not have the best opinion of women in telling dudes how to talk to women and what to do. And I figured I could maybe step in and be a counterbalance to that, because AI girlfriends are now starting to gain in popularity. And of course, in the only way America knows how, they are framing that conversation from a perspective of How are business owners going to hire these people? I feel like there might be some much bigger issues lingering that we should maybe be jumping into. And that's what we'll do to wrap the show on. And I'm going to start it off with an article from the New York Post that is a call out to some friends of mine that I grew up with that almost certainly aren't listening, but I'm going to have to send them this segment because this one ties in as well. I won't even tell you what it's about. I'm just going to have to let it linger there until you come back from commercial break. And then you guys can be like, really, Ben, this is what we're talking about? But yes, you have no say. How are you going to stop me? You can't. We'll be back on the other side of the break. You're listening to Outside the Box with Ben Cominos here on WHBY. All right. TikTok chat already giving me ideas for tomorrow's show. We're going to have an interesting conversation about mineral rights and mining operations here in America, but like in a level-headed way, because I think there's like an actual economic conversation to be made for some. I couldn't care less. The economy's fake, but I understand the logic coming from some people on that conversation for sure. Um, but so I want to wrap this show up. And by the way, we were having some fun on the chats here because before I get into the actual story of the day, the New York Post, which is like the right wing, the pro corporate version of, well, that's kind of a funny way to describe it, as if the New York Times isn't pro corporate. They have an article that I came across that reminded me of one of my one of my good friends used to work at the zoo, and and he would always say, I get to work, I clock in, and then I immediately go to the restroom and hang out for a while. He goes, I might not even need to use it, but that's my me time where I get my mind right for the rest of the day. I had another friend who worked security at our local amusement park, Kennywood, who had a similar idea. And something tells me, based on the people in my chats, based on how many of you guys are listening to me right now, using the restroom on the clock is not an unknown thing here. And the idea that companies need you locked in and attentive the entire time is laughable. Meanwhile, the New York Post takes time to say, this is their title, not mine. I'm not being crass at 10:53 in the morning. How to make yourself poop regularly in the morning before going to work. And I'm here to say right now that this article is innately anti working class, because that's your time. You do what you need to do. Don't change your lifestyle habits as a result of what one corporate publication has to tell you about this kind of stuff. It's nonsensical. Now, on a more serious note, there's another article coming out in Fortune surrounding teenage boys right now, saying that these teenage boys are choosing AI girlfriends over real ones, and this is in their terms, for maximum control and zero rejection. Experts are saying, this is according to Fortune, experts are saying it will make them unemployable. And I'm here to say that these young men are choosing AI women in order to exert control and avoid rejection. And your main concern is whether or not they're going to be able to get a job as a data analyst or not. I am here to tell you that I think there's a much bigger issue facing young men, as one person immediately comments saying, oh, that's dangerous. Exactly my point here. And it's just the tip of the iceberg, because I was blessed and cursed with this Rain Man style memory. I remember getting rejected, having a crush on the girl and trying to figure out how I was going to ever convince her to go on a date with me, and then realizing it wasn't going to happen, and then sending my interest somewhere else. I'd argue that's a very important job of learning to be a man, because not everybody is going to be into you. And like, that should be a normal way to react. And the fact that teenage boys are seeing this, what do you think they're going to grow into? What do you think that they're going to ultimately end up talking like and acting like as a result of this opportunity? Again, I'm not a big AI user in general, but I saw a South Park about it, and it seems as though any idea you ever give AI, it sits there and it tells you what a great idea it was, regardless of how stupid that idea was. And then all of a sudden you go and try and run that idea up the flagpole, and then real people with an actual ability to think and process and point out, hey, maybe there's a bad idea there, maybe that's not the best, that's the best thing to do, but they don't get that feedback when interacting with an AI. Now envision that, but with your partner. We have a minute and 40 seconds and we're getting a call. If you can do this in 60 seconds, we'll get you on. Hello, you're on Outside the Box.
Hey, Ben, it's Anna. I just had a quick story about the red pilling, manosphere, angry men stuff. I watched a guy who realized that he had red pilled himself and then in real time undid that because he was sad that a girl rejected him at a party. And he was sitting at a bench, sad about said rejection. And another girl sat on the bench and he next to him while he was teary-eyed, and she was kind to him. And he was like, oh my God, it turns out that all women aren't awful. And it took that real life experience for him to acknowledge that, but that he had spent years online, like
Exactly.
players, like hearing over and over again how awful people women are.
Right. And I appreciate the call, and I have to let you go there, but that's exactly the problem. And now these AI bots are pulling from those type of channels because that's all AI can do, and it's funneling that information into young people's heads, and I just have a bad feeling about that trajectory. There's a lot to not like about it, and just something to be aware of. I'm not a parent. If you're a parent and you have a preteen, this is a real issue that you're going to be faced with. And I think it's important to highlight that not every girl is going to be interested, but it doesn't mean you turn to the virtual. You got to stay in real life. And with that, I got to get out of here. Haley's up next with hopefully a more uplifting message than that. Follow me on TikTok. Follow me on Facebook. Follow me on YouTube. And, of course, download the WHBY app. And we'll be back for a whole new show tomorrow, Outside the Box.